As of late, I have been playing some Warframes that are at the bottom of my usage rate, and these frames are also ones that I personally don't see too often in missions. It's one thing to play a lower pick rate Warframe for fun, but when the experience consists of realising that I've been missing out on a top tier Warframe for so long, I can't help but feel like I'm playing a new game. When a Warframe gets stale, sometimes the best way to save your enjoyment is to play a frame who you maybe have not invested too much time into to see what you have been missing out on. In today's video, I have 3 frame suggestions for you to try who I believe to be overlooked and underrated. Frames that are far more powerful than most players realise and who I don't see get enough usage. And we'll have builds and setups included so that you know what approach to go with for your chosen playstyle when you do try them. Ironically, our first frame that we're looking at today is one of my least favourite frames to play, but don't worry, this has nothing to do with their effectiveness. Gara's playstyle has just never really clicked with me from an enjoyment standpoint, but I can't deny how good she is at what she does. She offers room-wide nuking, enemy debuffing, crowd control, damage reduction for herself and her team and defense objectives, energy sustain and infinite scaling one-shot damage. There's also multiple ways to go around building her, as you can switch your focus from a Shattered Lash to a Splinter Storm for 2 different DPS playstyles. As for the setup that I've actually enjoyed using as of late, I've been going with a Shattered Lash setup that focuses on boosting the damage of her 1 as much as possible whilst using the synergies it has with companion invis. There are a few ways to increase the damage of our Shattered Lash in order to make its DPS scale beyond just a stat stick build. Our first obvious option is to subsume on Raw over Gara's 3rd. Spectrosiphon is a solid augment if you want to keep her 3rd and help with your team and energy, but on this setup it won't be necessary. Our reason for choosing Raw is due to its buff affecting ability damage, and with Shattered Lash being slash focused, it can help increase the damage of our slash procs. We are then using the Shattered Storm augment, which allows us to spread the enemy debuff from our Splinter Storm to larger groups of enemies upon destroying our Mass Vitrify with Shattered Lash. As for our stat stick, the mods are of course very important, but the choice of weapon can also affect our damage. Choosing an Incarna melee weapon with the ability to boost either of its crit or status chance can apply said buff to the base stats of Shattered Lash. Thus, we are choosing the Ceramic Dagger Incarna for its status buff. You can boost your crit and build for that, but for better scaling and slash proccing, modding for status in my opinion is the better option. Shattered Lash has a really bad base status and crit, so without the use of Incarna stat sticks, I wouldn't really recommend building for it unfortunately. As for the stat stick, if you have chosen the status evolution, then your focus should be boosting your raw damage, slash and status. Weeping Wounds is extremely useful and combines nicely with our choices of focus school, Naramon. Naramon, with its ability to decay your combo slowly over time and retain the high damage multiplier, is an enormous buff to Shattered Lash. You will however have to build this combo up first with the dagger, as although Lash can make use of the multiplier, it can't build combo with its attacks. And finally, we are using the Shade for its invis. You can also use the Hero's Kubo if you own one, but the reason for choosing an invis companion is due to Shattered Lash not counting as a weapon attack, meaning it will not break the invis effect. Building Gara for a nice balance of range, energy sustain and strength while keeping your duration relatively in check will allow you to spam all of your skills and stay alive when your invis is not procced. If you don't want to be invisible, then I'd recommend dropping Streamline for adaptation and then maxing out Fleeting with some duration shards to compensate for the duration loss. As for how to play her, you want to build your dagger combo as soon as possible. Cast your 2, 3, then your 4. Destroy your 4 with your Shattered Lash to build your Splinter Storm damage. Then cast your 4 again to refresh the duration of your Splinter Storm to keep the damage increase going. Destroy your 4 with Shattered Lash again and then rinse and repeat to not only refresh your Splinter Storm duration but also keep and increase its damage over time. This process with this setup will wipe rooms and spread the Splinter Storm debuff while building your Death Touch damage, all from the safety of your companion invis. Our next frame has been featured on the channel before in our top 5 most underrated Warframes tier list, but since that video I've updated my setup and playstyle with him, and I feel it's necessary to revisit him and make another case for him being better than you think. Qorvex is an incredible Warframe. Convenient health tanking, CC, radiation status spread, armor stripping, status immunity and room nuke damage chaining. Qorvex is exactly what he is advertised as, just a giant fucking wall of a Warframe. His high armor values combined with his 3 for incredibly high damage reduction, providing you with very simple tankiness that scales quite a bit further than you may think. His augment for his 2 provides his grouping skill with a much needed armor strip. Although his 4 combined with his 1 can easily chew through higher level armor, the strip just takes him to a whole new level and adds a much needed bonus bit of value to his grouping, which would normally be outclassed by something like Ensnare. Shooting his Crucible Blast into his pillars will chain multiply the explosions, prolonging its damage to deal with corridors and enemies in seconds. Whilst base kit is excellent, especially with his Wrecking Wall augment, an even stronger DPS setup can be accessed through the Helmet ability. Tesla on its own is not useful, but when used with its augment, Tesla Bank allows you to chain the damage dealt to the tasered target to the surrounding enemies. Against armor this isn't great, but when combined with the Wrecking Wall augment, amplifies all of the explosions from Crucible Blast to disperse to the other clumped together enemies for even more damage than when amplified by Qorvex's usual pillars. This setup is for those who are not satisfied with Qorvex's damage output, even though I'd happily defend his DPS with or without Wrecking Wall. Using Nautilus as a second form of grouping will also help your spread and chain the explosions of Crucible Blast. In terms of weaponry, it's worth choosing guns that don't have much punch through, but make up for in large amounts of DPS, so that way you can synergize the punch through with the grouping from Containment Wall. As for melees, the punch through also works on gunblades, so a melee influence Redeemer is a great option. He's also very easy to play, keeping your 3 active and grouping enemies with your armor stripping walls. Spamming Tesla Bank and Crucible Blast and just watching hordes fall over is extremely satisfying and effective. I'll continue to vouch for this frame, and he'll probably still wind up getting buffed in the future due to the player base's perception of him. And now moving on to our third and final frame today, we have the Headless Horseman goth baddie, Dagath. Now while Dagath has definitely caught up some speed lately in terms of an increased pick rate, she's still mostly left to the side. I just never see her in my missions. This makes absolutely no sense, and I can't lie, I've also been sleeping on this frame for some time now. I'd certainly up her rank that I placed her in the tier list video. From a solid caster playstyle that works with shield gating, crit and viral debuffing, armor strip, enemy nuking, and large invulnerability duration, Dagath not only has one of the most overpowered tank setups in the game, but also a rim nuke take on Dante's Darkverse that easily rivals Nezha's Darkverse setup. The focus of this segment is going to be more on 2 different helmet options and playstyles rather than overly specific weapon and companion choices like we did with Gara. The first setup I wanted to look at can be lenient with the choice of helmet, as the main focus is on her Grave Spirit augment. This augment skips the first stage of her 3rd ability and instead puts you straight into the iframes that come when you die with the ability. These iframes can be increased with power duration up to over 30 seconds of pure invulnerability. The catch being that there's a cooldown after the duration is up. However, the cooldown can be reduced by getting kills. So just speedrun through a few hordes and you can get right back to the borderline permanent invincibility. It absolutely baffles me that this is a setup that is not caught onto the same level as popularity as Revenant and his tanking. Sure, it requires kills to reduce the cooldown, but that's easily acquired when using Rolling Guard or Brief Respite to keep yourself alive in between casts of the 3rd. And she offers so much more than just tanking. The augment also spreads Doom, meaning that you can subsume off her too. In this case, I have chosen Wrathful Advance for a melee setup, and you can still spread viral and send out your horses for damage and armor reduction. This setup is easily one of my favourite ways to go about using melee, and speaking of melees, I have a quick option for you without using melee influence for once. Dagath's signature bladed whip works perfectly for this setup, the Doorclave. Using the basic standstill initial swing to lift enemies and make them trigger melee afflictions will one-shot anything it touches. Throw in the viral debuff from your 1 for good measure, and Wrathful Advance for the big funny red numbers, and you have a melee that can cut through enemies in one hit way before any combo count or heavy attacks are used. And of course you can run this with a different subsume for a more gun focused playstyle if you wish. As for the Darkverse setup, we are subsuming it onto a 4th ability slot. Dagath is of course one of very few frames that can use Dante's subsume to its fullest potential, Nezha being another great example with his Divine Retribution synergy. The combination of Dagath's 2 and 1 synergy and applying the repeat viral damage allows the slash from Darkverse to deal far more damage and scale into higher levels. It's not going to take you to the level cap, but this is one of those quick and efficient Still Path mission wipe setups that provides a caster heavy, satisfying playstyle. Simply keep your 3 active, cast your 2 and your 1, and then mash your Dark Verse a few times and watch everything around you bleed to death in seconds. As you can imagine with most of Dagath's builds, casting speed shards are necessary, and it's no different here. This is probably my biggest criticism of Dagath's kit because it really feels awful without it, and the Dark Verse setup especially does not feel viable on base casting speed. In conclusion, Dagath offers huge nuking potential and top tier survivability, while admittedly being a bit of a selfish frame lacking huge team support. She has a variety of setups to run and is one of my personal favourites to run right now if I'm looking for a more refreshing option. And that's going to do it for the 3 frames that I would highly recommend you guys pick up because I just don't really see them being run a lot. It's been especially fun trying Dagath and Gara because I have been a bit of a Qorvex fan previously. Finally throwing some format into my Gara feels really good because she is incredibly strong, albeit requires a little bit of charge up with, combo count and spamming her 4 with her 2 and her 1. Not my favourite playstyle, but Gara really does kick ass, and it's fucking satisfying nuking rooms with her, I can't even lie. And of course her fashion is top tier. And then Dagath is super unique, also a big fan of her fashion, but she just feels really fun to use. Big thing that helped me enjoy her is that Grave Spirit setup. I enjoy her base kit, I do like the horses, but overall I think I prefer the Dark Verse setup from a damage standpoint. It's just really satisfying, it gives me a little bit of a different option to that of Dante and Nezha for an ability that I really enjoy, but being able to turn her from that into a really tanky Warframe to just use melee with is also something I didn't realise I needed till now. And then Qorvex is probably the frame that I'm going to recommend the hardest at the end right here. I'm hoping the Deep Archimedia gameplay did it justice. I know it's not level cap gameplay, but Deep Archimedia is probably the highest level gameplay that your average Warframe player is going to go to outside of an occasional endless mission. And the setup is just making that mission complete light work. The armor strip and Tesla bank and his crucible blast, it's such a satisfying combination. He really does just feel like he locks down an entire corridor and nothing's going to get past him. Probably the most fun I've had in a while on this game whilst we're waiting for new content to drop. If you guys enjoyed the video and found it useful, please feel free to like and subscribe. All my links are in the description. If you ever feel like watching the stream, please feel free to follow me on Twitch. If not, then no worries. I appreciate all the support as always, and I hope you guys have an amazing day. Till next time.